Hello, everybody, and welcome to Finding Your First or Next CL Job, a 2025 virtual Q&A presented by the American Psychiatric Association and the Academy for Consultation-Liaison Psychiatry. My name is Chandan Kandai, and I'll be moderator for the show. Just know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted online for later viewing on both APA and ACLP's websites. So feel free to take notes or not, or just listen to us. We're going to be doing a brief presentation at the very beginning, then we'll have a lot of room for questions at the end. So feel free to put questions in the chat as we go along, and then we'll answer them as we when we get to the Q&A. So just a quick outline of our webinar today. We're first going to spend about 15 minutes talking briefly about why C-L Psychiatry, the application process in a nutshell, and then networking opportunities at the upcoming C-L conference in San Antonio in November. We're then going to introduce our amazing Finding a C-L Job panel, and then the vast majority of our time is going to be Q&A with y'all as the attendees. We're going to be doing a mix of pre-sent questions y'all filled out during registration and also live questions from y'all. This is one of my favorite events of the year because we get to keep it really real about finding your first or next CL job. So please ask us anything. There's no such thing as a silly question. So going into why CL Psychiatry is because there's so many facets. Like CL Psychiatry is more like CL Psychiatries. Most of us are familiar with the inpatient general consult model. But there's also med psych units working in emergency psychiatry, and a lot of consults actually happens in the outpatient setting. There's traditional consult models, but there's also proactive consults, integrated embedded models, collaborative care, and e-consults. And then you can sub-specialize, which is what a lot of us do in our field. So you can do sub-specialize from addictions to burns to cardiac psychiatry. Critical care psychiatry is huge, HIV/AIDS, neuropsych, palliative care, psycho-oncology, trans and women's mental health. If there's a field of medicine, there's going to be at least one CL psychiatrist who sub-specializes in it. So lots of ways you can help make your mark. So it's also really important to note, I know it's no longer in vogue nowadays, but CL plays an important role in equity and social justice in our medical system, because we know that patients with psychiatric substance use disorders are underserved in our general medical system. We also know that minoritized and underserved populations are underserved in our mental health system. So CL Psychiatry really serves an important role in creating equity, because we're an embedded role within the larger healthcare system, and we're often an entry point for vulnerable patients into mental health treatment who wouldn't normally be seen in the outpatient setting or the inpatient setting. We also create a lot of opportunities for advocacy and education of physician peers and healthcare staff. So if you ever were really big into Mali when you're from government and then you decided to go into medicine, good news, you can still do that now in CL Psychiatry. Now, the problem is that applying for CL jobs is very different to applying to residency fellowship. Up until now, there's a very set way of doing things, especially residency and fellowship. We had a program list. There's a very set timeline for everybody. There's a centralized process. You pay for the interviews. There's clear job duties and expectations. There's not really room for negotiation of the resident or fellow salaries, just set money and benefits. There's a match, so you just put in a list and an algorithm spits out. And then there's a clear start date and end date. When you get into the CL jobs, just the final employment perspective, there's no clear list of positions, which we're going to be talking about a lot. There's a rolling time, things just come up and you apply for them as they come up. There's absolutely no centralized process. They should be paying for interviews. There's no preset job duties or expectations, and varied money and benefits. There's a lot more room to negotiate everything. There's no match, and there's no clear start date or end date, which is part of the reason why we're having this webinar, to help kind of clarify some of these things as y'all go out into the workforce someday. So things to look for. Again, this is not exhaustive, but just some basic things you should start thinking about is geographic location. Where in our great nation do you want to be working? Are you thinking overall academic versus a community or private? Do you want to work in person versus work from home, and how much of both do you want? What's the reputation of the place that you want to be working for, their residency and fellowship, the department, the hospital, the medical center? Other CL faculty, would you like to be the only person doing what you do and be unique? Or would you like to have a lot of other people doing what you do and have other people to talk to and share the workload with? Overall, what's consult volume, workflow, team composition like? Are there RVU requirements, or do you just get paid a set amount for doing whatever? What are the clinical opportunities, like inpatient versus outpatient? Like, is it all inpatient? Do you get to have an opportunity to be like the C-L psychiatrist working in like the women's MFM clinic or like an internal medicine clinic, like an embedded practice? What are the benefits like? Like, let's not lie, money is important. So what is the salary, health insurance, vacation, conference time, retirement, PSLF eligibility? In the academic role, do you get protected time to do academic stuff? Do you get reimbursed for educational costs? Is there opportunities for research and teaching? What is the culture around diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, especially in these days? For IMG applicants, like, are we gonna do a visa sponsorship? Is there Conrad waiver available? And last but not least, what is the ability to do moonlighting internally? Also just do side gigs. Is there a restrictive covenant or can you just work for whomever? So where do you find CL jobs? The first place to start is ideally the home institution where you are right now. There's also organizational listings through the ACLP Job Flash. Also, APA has a job central, and then state psychiatric societies often have listservs that you can post jobs on. Institutional websites may sometimes have we're hiring ads. Counter exhibit halls, including at ACLP, will have places advertise, hey, we're looking for people to come join us. But a lot of it is just word of mouth and connections, and many, many jobs are not listed, including every single job I have had. So just an example of like how, like contacting programs, like, because again, there's no ERAS to let people know you're interested. So this is an email from literally when I was applying for my first job out of residency. I was a CL fellow at University of Washington, and I just emailed Dr. Cooper. Dr. Joey Cooper is this amazing neuropsychiatrist who I happen to know worked at an institution in Chicago, UIC. So I said, Dr. Cooper, Happy New Year. This was after the New Year. Hope this finds you well at UIC. I wanted to reach out as I heard from a friend that UIC may be hiring CL faculty. I'm in CL fellowship now at University of Washington, but would love to return to Chicago area when done. All true. I would love your advice on how to apply for this if still open and whom to contact. Because, sidebar, I had no idea how this process worked. Sincerely, Chandan Kandai, CL fellow, University of Washington. And so he emailed me back actually in a few days, like, hi Chandan, thanks for writing and I hope that you're doing well. We'd love to talk to you more about possibilities. Exciting, but vague. If you email your CV to Lon Fan, MD, or Vice Chair for Clinical Affairs, you can start the discussions. So we just kind of took it from there. So then this is the email I sent to Dr. Fan, who is the Vice Chair of Clinical Affairs, aka the person who'd be in charge of hiring me. So I just said, hey, this is who I am. I'm a current PGY5, CFL at University of Washington. After completing general residency at Northwestern, hint, hint, I'm from the area. I'm applying for academic CL positions after finishing fellowship, and Dr. Cooper suggested I email you about applying to UIC. Name drop, this is how I need to email you. I have a strong interest in CL psychiatry. Just say all the things I'm interested in. Say why I'm interested personally. I'm originally from the Chicago area, and please find attached a copy of my CV for your convenience. Would love to talk. We talked, I applied, I got lucky and got the job. So when you do the interview process itself, you also have to be thinking, oh, doing virtual versus in person, because now things are starting to transition back to a lot of in-person stuff. Do you need days off? Like, do you take interview academic days versus vacation days? And how does that work if you're in fellowship right now versus if you're literally working for somebody else? Like, how discreet do you have to be? Oftentimes it goes multiple rounds, especially if it's virtual or if there's multiple people applying. But general tips we have are ensure quiet place with good Wi-Fi and lighting for virtual interviews, create a list of questions you want to ask during the interview, have PDFs of your CV publications available if needed to send to interviewers, and then always thank the organization post-interview. So let's say you get a job, they offer you one, congrats, first of all, that's amazing. Things you got to start thinking about. What's the start date of your job versus the finish date of your training or last job? Like, do they want you to start at a certain time, and can you, or do you literally have to be working at another place till then? Think about the permanent licenses you will need, and if you need your DEA, almost always you do. And some states getting the state medical license is really, really hard. So California, Texas, Illinois, I'm looking at you. If you are relocating, think about housing. Are you going to buy versus rent? What neighborhoods you want to live in? Are you going to be doing car versus public transit? What are the benefits you need to sign up for? And what are the options with healthcare, vacation, disability? Think about finding a new dentist, doctor, therapist, bank, childcare, house of worship. And is there a moving allowance? And is that paid directly to you, or do you buy stuff and then they reimburse you? Always reach out to current faculty for advice, because that can be very helpful in helping you overcome some hidden obstacles. Some additional online resources for finding a CL job. Again, ACLP is a great place to start, as is the APA's CL Psychiatry homepage. The APA has a whole council on CL Psychiatry. We're one of the sponsors of this event, which is also a great resource, as is the ACLP Early Career Psychiatrist, or ECP Special Interest Group and listserv. Facebook has CL Pen, which is how a lot of you heard about this event to begin with. And then different places of career listings, the ACLP Career Finder, APA Job Central, and local APA district branch listservs and websites. So the ACLP, the Academy also has a mentorship subcommittee, which is delighted to offer members years out from training the option to receive career consultation. So basically just, hey, this is how you can help start or advance your career. So it's provided by experienced Academy members and includes conversation, program development, research, leadership, training education, career options. They last usually at least 30 minutes and conducted by video calls and accepted on a rolling basis throughout the year. So you can actually sign up at this website, clpsychiatry.org/career consultations. One big thing we want to plug, because it's coming up in less than a month, ACLP is having its annual conference this year in San Antonio, the great state of Texas. The meeting theme will be Innovation in CL Psychiatry, exploring the promise and pitfalls of new approaches. This is a great opportunity to network, meet potential employers and employees. And there's several formal and informal events and opportunities to find your first or next CL job at the conference itself. So that concludes the formal part of our talk. So I'll quickly go ahead and introduce our amazing panel. So in alphabetical order, first, we have Dr. Jeremy Chaikin at the University of Minnesota Medical Center. Thanks so much, Jeremy, for joining us. Next, we have Dr. Cheryl Fleisch, who's in community practice. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for joining us. We have Dr. Anik Forrester from the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Thank you so much, Anik, for joining us. We have Dr. Shruti Mutalik from the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Thank you so much, Shruti, for joining us. We have Dr. Jordan Rosen from the University of Virginia Medical Center. Thanks, Jordan, for joining us. And last but not least, we have Dr. Mira Zain from Stanford University and San Mateo Medical Center. Thanks again, Mira, for joining us. So, and then there's me. I'm at UT Southwestern in Dallas, Texas, and I do things here and there. So now we're going to do Q&A. So I don't see the Q&A function in the chat, so go ahead and just put it in the chat itself. Addressed us. And what we'll do is we're going to start with a mix of pre-sent questions, then go through the chat one by one. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing for now. And first of all, panel, thanks so much for joining us for this evening. First question I have for you, perennial question, so we ask at the beginning every year. To everybody, do you need to have done CL fellowship to do a CL job? Honest answers only. Go.
I think it's easier when you call on people. I will say as someone who is CL trained that no, you don't need to. I have plenty of friends who are in CL positions without having done a CL fellowship. A lot of it will come down to where you want to practice, and a lot of, for instance, if you're in a city with a lot of specialized academic centers, then it's going to be much harder to get a job without it. What I will say though is CL fellowships can teach you so much additional knowledge that if you're willing to do that extra year, it's awesome to do the fellowship. So I recommend it.
Yeah, there are certainly CL jobs that exist even in academic settings where you don't need a CL fellowship. I would also agree with Dr. Zine that what you learn in the CL fellowship year is so valuable. I would even say the L side ends up being even more important in the attending level of really understanding how to, liaise and work across the system. And I think it makes it a lot easier to find that CL job and really flourish in it when you understand how to manipulate systems and work through them.
And I think it becomes an individual question for you and kind of what you're able to do and whether you can take a year of not getting an attending salary and being able to do that for fellowship if you can potentially justify moving somewhere for a year. But there are definitely a lot of advantages to doing the CL fellowship. Frankly, even if you're not doing what is classically CL work, and we already talked a little bit about, you know, the various ways in which CL can help you, but I think there is almost no situation I've been in psychiatry where the CL part of my training was not a benefit in some way or another. The other thing I would bring up is that many of you will have gone to programs that had extensive CL training as part of residency. And so I've been asked by some people, well, okay, I went somewhere that had a ton of CL as part of my residency. Do I really need to do a fellowship? No, but it's not exactly the same thing as when you're a resident and you're operating at a different level and you've got other things to kind of worry about and other priorities. I think somebody told me before I applied for CL fellowship that even if you go to the same exact place you went for residency, there's something different about being a CL fellow where your entire job is to be a CL fellow and to focus on this. And it is a year where you get to completely focus on that one thing. And although you can learn a lot on the job, although you learned a lot during residency, it's not the same as having a year dedicated for the primary purpose of learning this thing. And so if you can make that, if you have that year that you can take, I think there's a lot of value to it, no matter what kind of job you end up doing.
Yeah, no, going off of that, I think as you were talking, the word that came to mind was immersive. I think there's something very valuable about immersion into CL for a whole year. And even though I'm biased, I feel like I look back on my CL fellowship year of training as like one of the most memorable and rewarding experiences of my life, not just in terms of education and taking your skills up a notch and all the learning and exposure to subspecialties, etc., which often doesn't happen in residency training. But in addition to that, also sort of the community, the connections. I think that my mentors and supervisors from my fellowship, you know, they're sort of like lifelong, you know, connections, friends, philosophers, guides that I've reached out to, you know, for years. And I definitely think that your co-fellows too, I think, form that sort of supportive professional community for you. So there's that. But I guess, yes, the technical answer is no, but I think there's a strong case to be made for doing a CL fellowship if you can. I think particularly in urban areas and academic centers, you know, often a CL fellowship is either, you know, required or you know, strongly recommended. It would make you very competitive compared to another candidate who does not have a CL fellowship. And certainly, you know, kind of once you're in academia, let's say they're sort of hiring a CL director, et cetera, or a fellowship director. Typically, I would say that a fellowship would stand you in very, very good stead in those situations. But yes, I think that certainly depending on, you know, where the area in which you're practicing or like CL coverage on weekends, et cetera, there are certainly opportunities to moonlight or do CL work. And I do know sort of off the top of my head, maybe some people who are in academic centers who are not CL trained, who are working in a CL program, but I think that increasingly, you know, that's not the norm.
I'm going to add to that. So I'm a fellowship training director, and I think one of the big things to kind of highlight is that doing the fellowship opens up more career opportunities than not. And it's the difference between being an employee and being somebody who has the stake in their own career and can write their own ticket. So I feel like the training, the experiences you get, and also the mindset change that happens is very unique in fellowship. And I did my fellowship in the same place that I did residency, and the experience was night and day. So people think it is not. It maybe looks one way on the outside, but true expertise is something that has to be sort of accrued over time, and you have to have the right foundation, and you can only get that foundation really in fellowship. The on-the-job training does not really prepare people for that over time.
I'll add one very tiny thing to what Shruti said and sort of what Anik said, which is if you are interested in being a CL fellowship director, you actually have to be CL trained. So that's just one thing to think about. You can actually run a CL service and not be CL trained, but to actually be the CL fellowship director, you have to be CL trained. The other thing is that there are some academic medical centers, like Shruti said, which will not accept you on the CL service unless you are CL trained. So I just wanted to state that there are still many CL services nationally that will allow you on the CL service if you are not CL trained, but some actually won't. There are many rural practices that still are interested. I didn't mean that as negatively as that sounded. There are many CL practices nationally that are very welcoming to people who are not CL trained.
So that was actually one of the first questions we got live in the Q&A for people who've completed fellowships. What specific advantages have you noticed in the job hunt as opposed to not having done fellowship? So attendees, be sure to read the Q&A too, because we're typing in answers as well. But a lot of it's already been answered already. Some specific things also to add, like Dr. Rosen wrote, is that if you're applying for the same job as somebody else who has a CL fellowship, most programs are going to take somebody who has the official qualifications. Also, a lot of institutions like my own at UT Southwestern will actually offer you a salary like bonus, like because you have completed additional like training and fellowship, which for a lot of people can be a significant, amount of money or benefits. So other just practical, concrete things to take into mind.
Just add one thing, Chandan,
Yeah, please.
about academic appointments. So most academic institutions will start folks who are not fellowship trained at instructor. And then if you are fellowship trained, you are started at assistant professor, which is very different in terms of the salary and also career trajectory sometimes. Sometimes at Maryland, it's like a 1-year formality, but that 1 year does make a difference.
Mm-hmm. No, great point. Thank you, Dr. So moving on to the next question. Shruti, I'll send this your way first. I'm going to open a group. Hello, I'm currently a PGY3 resident on a J1 visa, thinking of becoming a C-L psychiatrist. Are there academic institutions that support a J waiver? So Shruti, have you and then Mira go.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I was actually just in the process of typing up the answer. So yes, the short answer is yes, there are. Of course, I think I think it never hurts to be proactive and reach out and send an email. I think Chandan gave a very nice example of a format for the email. So because I do know off the top of my head, like I remember when I was in that position, and happy to share a little bit about my story with that. But when I was searching, I remember, I think Yale New Haven, at least at the time, did sponsor J1 waivers. So I think that there are certainly academic institutions and, CL positions can work out, but I think there's also some element of chance and timing, etc. But, definitely if you are on a visa status, I would say start looking as early as possible, start networking and reaching out as early as possible. And as we know, with the J1 visa, so I was on a J1 visa, and you can essentially extend it 1 year at a time for a maximum of 7 years. But then beyond that, or once you finish your training, you have to do either this waiver in an underserved area or go back to your home country for 2 years. And the waiver in an underserved area, so each state has these Conrad 30 or 30 different positions. One thing to keep in mind also with that is that the rules or the rules of engagement kind of vary from state to state. So definitely, I think knowledge is power. Educate yourself, from the state websites, etc. I think a legal consultation was pretty helpful to me. I think that just know, since especially in the current climate, et cetera, rules are evolving and changing so quickly. So definitely helps to stay abreast of them. But I think that would also change the way you apply. So as a very concrete example, I remember that now it's been about a decade, but at least when I was applying, so, some of the states that I was looking at were New York, Connecticut, and the rules were very different for J1 in both those states. So for Connecticut, it was first come, first served. So what I was told by the programs and the lawyers is that basically you actually have to go on the day that the process opens, and people are, they line up at like 3 a.m. just to get their applications in so that they can be in those 30 slots, because once the 30 slots close, that's it for that state. But New York, on the other hand, was very different. It had a lottery system. And so, even if you apply, whether you applied, at the start of a cycle or at the end of the cycle, it was basically random whether, you got picked or not. But essentially, I would say, yeah, legal consultation, apply early, reach out early. And yes, there definitely are academic and CL positions that are available with an H-1B and with a J-1 waiver. You just have to sort of reach out and keep your eyes open.
Mira, I think you had some stuff to add too.
Yeah, I think similarly, right? If it doesn't say explicitly on a CL fellowship website, and some of them will absolutely just state on there, to send an email to the program and ask, and they'll be able to tell you what's going on. But it is, right, similar to what Shruti was saying, right? I know at Stanford, we've had people come on J-1 visas, and we both interviewed and actually accepted as fellows. And one of my colleagues who works with me at Stanford did her fellowship at Columbia, and she did it on a J-1. So absolutely out there. Neither of the programs actually advertise it on the website. So always feel comfortable sending in an email asking.
Any other things that people want to add before we move on to the next question? All right, so moving on, because the next one is spicy. Other specific concerns murmurs in the CL world institutions about H-1B sponsorship with the current proclamation, despite doctors not technically falling into the lottery. Just as a side note, we have done the seminar for the past 4 years now. The last time was last year's October, where this was not an issue, so voting matters. Panel, any like hot goss or like tea about like H-1B sponsorship now, like for CL world, at least on the job side?
So I of course don't want to like misinform everybody, but I've been kind of looking online, and some of this is like Reddit threads and everything. So take it. Well, but what I have heard. So I guess just to again give a little bit of the lay of the land at baseline before all this happened. So essentially, you could, as an international medical graduate, train on either a J-1 or an H-1B. And then with the J-1, in order to convert to an H-1B, you had to either do a waiver in an underserved area or go back to your home country. And with the H-1B, you still needed it to be renewed as an attending. So, when you did your residency or your fellowship, you were on H-1, but you needed a separate sponsorship for your attending job. And then furthermore, there's also sort of like the green card process and everything. So, of course, when I heard about this $100,000 fee now that, has to be paid by an institution that's like sponsoring somebody, I think there was certainly a lot of stress. And as you can imagine, what I have read online, and again, I'm not 100% sure, I think a lawyer would best be able to answer this, but it seems as though I think that that's more for when you're applying from outside the country. I don't think that it applies when you're on a visa status within the country and are converting to H-1B. So again, I mean, we should definitely verify this, but at least that's what I've seen. So let's say you're on a J-1 and converting to an H-1. I don't think that should, or F-1 to H-1B, let's say, I don't think that should come into play. But yes, this is certainly going to affect recruitment of IMGs, who are outside the country and who are applying for H-1Bs.
I am by no means an expert on this, but I think the question was rumors, concerns, and I would just say I'm very nervous. I feel like I don't know what to say about it other than I'm just nervous. If I put my residency hat on, I'm very scared for residents that are on an H-1B right now. I'm just nervous about it. I don't know what's going to happen. It's just hard to predict. It would not stop us from interviewing people by any means, and I just don't know what's coming. And I think that's probably the most honest answer I can give. I'm just nervous about it.
So, Shruti, again, back to you. Just as an added resource, especially for IMGs in the audience, does ACLP have like an IMG group or like association or caucus or anything that could maybe be a good resource for people?
That is such a wonderful question. Yes. And a very specific question. Yes, no, happy to answer it. So we do have, this is sort of very young and just a developing space. But yes, we do have an International Medical Graduate Caucus, the ACLP IMG Caucus. And Dr. Paula Zimbrian is the chair of the caucus, and I'm the vice chair of the caucus. And yes, we are meeting at the ACLP conference in November, so we would love to see you there, and we'll definitely send out more details through the listserv, which I believe is just recently active. So yes, that's definitely one resource to sort of brainstorm about, CL jobs with visa limitations, etc.
And just one thing I'll add before we move on to the next couple of questions, because they are great, let me tell you, panel, is that AP, American Psychiatric Association, is the largest psychiatric organization in the country, likely the planet, and they're doing a lot of advocacy around this issue because IMGs form like the backbone of all of our psychiatric workforce. So just know that organized psychiatry is really fighting for you to make sure that we get what we need. So shifting gears a little bit to the actual oh my God, this next one is so good. Like I wish I'd thought about this when I was applying for jobs. Given that inpatient CL jobs are often difficult to come by, what advice do you have for current CL fellow looking for primarily inpatient jobs? How do you piece together 1.0 FTE or full-time equivalent if most jobs offer part-time?
I'll take a stab at this using my own personal experience. So when I was applying, I was really looking to where I wanted to work more than the job itself. And at the time that I applied to University of Maryland, there was no open time on the inpatient CL service. And so the question sort of was raised, what else are you willing to do? And so, as we talked about before, the fellowship prepares you in such a way that you can kind of do anything. So, my first academic job, my first full FTE at University of Maryland was 60% outpatient, general community clinic, and 40% within CL, but all outpatient CL, no inpatient. So, I did the HIV clinic, I did outpatient bone marrow transplant evaluations. And that's what I did. That was my first job. And 2 years later, I moved into the inpatient CL service.
Building off of what Anik said, I think that if you approach it that way too, is that you can keep your eye open for things in neighboring institutions. So I work right now at Stanford and at San Mateo. I do my inpatient at San Mateo or inpatient CL, and I do like outpatient collaborative care at Stanford. And so if you are approaching it in terms of being flexible as to what you're going to start with, then you can piece together over time. It took me a few years to get to that place. But you can absolutely, like if you are patient and willing to do that, find the perfect combination for you. And if you're flexible in terms of the location, that makes it even easier because if you're trying to find something primarily inpatient and you're just like, that's what's the most important, but location can be more flexible, there are a lot of places that will have those. And then there's a lot of places that will also do like combination. Like we'll give you CL, but you also have to do ED consults and maybe cover inpatient for a little while because we have just less staff overall. So we need you to wear those multiple hats. So it's thinking about what you're willing to be more flexible on and what is the most important thing for you to be very focused on that has to be answered in that way.
It's very much it's like, location, type of job, academic versus community, pick two or pick 1.5. And yeah, you may not fall into at first your absolute best checks all 3 boxes, but you can kind of prioritize which part is most important. From the job standpoint, again, CL can fit into a lot of different things. And there may be things that you're like, oh, I'm absolutely not doing that. Like, maybe inpatient unit is not for you. It's not really for me. I'm like, I really do not want to do that. And so then fine, you don't pick a job that has that, but CL principles can be applied certainly in an outpatient setting. CL principles can be applied in what I do most of, which at this point, which is interventional psychiatry neuromodulation. Women's mental health is a form of CL. There's a lot of these, there's a lot of areas in which CL sort of bleeds into, and then you can kind of just continue to put out there that yes, you are still interested in doing the CL, inpatient job. You can continue to get involved in, say, service, CL-related service opportunities to the department. I've been doing lectures for the residents and medical students about CL, which honestly I love doing, but is a good way to sort of remind people that, yeah, I'm available and know CL, and maybe if more positions open up, that would be something they can consider me for. But I would say, back to the original question of, if you are trying to do that, if your goal is to be at an academic center on a CL, on an inpatient CL service, and you're already looking at it, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of opportunities, I would imagine if you do not have a CL fellowship, that's going to put you way down the priority list compared to somebody who does come in, has a CL fellowship, and is waiting in the wings. Versus if you have that, depending on where you're at, that might be more of a resource that will make them look towards you versus somebody else to take the CL spot open, even if somebody else has been there longer and maybe has expressed an interest as well.
I will add, to kind of summarize what everyone else has said, that I think you need to understand what your bottom line is. And so that includes like money, hours, schedule, subspecialty, your location, where your family is located. You cannot pick all of them. So if for you, it happens to be being on an inpatient service, which was actually exactly what mine was, I literally did not care how much money I made as long as it was reasonable. I literally didn't care where I lived in the country. I did not care what my hours were, like how much I worked. It was just important to me that I worked on an inpatient service, and everybody told me that you're never going to get what you want right when you start. You can get what you want. You just have to give up everything else. And I don't mean that in any way other than it sounds. So I got 80% inpatient, and then I got the other 20% developing a clinic that I negotiated. Like I wanted the other 20% to develop a subspecialty clinic for myself. And so, but you have to realize that you can't have the other things. So it's like when you buy a house, it never ends up working out what you want. You wanted a 4-bedroom, but you end up getting a 3-bedroom because the bathroom's nicer. And then, you wanted a 2-story, but you end up getting a 1-story in the location that kind of sucks worse. So you have to think of it sort of like that. So I don't know if anybody else has things to add to that, but that's sort of how I think about it. You can have some of the things you want, but not all the things you want.
So we're doing house hunters with jobs, essentially.
Yeah, kind of. That's at least how I've taken it. So like right now I'm in a role totally different, and I'm getting, again, what I need in my life right now for me, now that I'm older. But when I started out, the things that were important to me then are now much more important to me. What wasn't important to me then is way more important to me now. So everything has totally switched for me in my life. And so what I do is totally different.
Yeah, Dr. Fleisch, I would love to add to that, because you said something that I was thinking about talking about, and I see another question down here that says, what are some ways to continue to specialize in the field after fellowship, such as cardiology, geriatrics, neuropsych? I'm going to try to link these two and something that you said in there. It is certainly possible to find, 80% inpatient, 20% admin jobs. I agree, you might be going somewhere across the country. You might have to really be flexible for that. I would also say that, 80% inpatient jobs can really burn you out. It's a lot. It is a lot of work. It's a lot of emotional work. And while it helps you build relationships very quickly in the hospital, some amount of time off the service is actually, it's so valuable. And I remember when I was looking for jobs originally, I like my dream job opened up somewhere, and it was 50% time ICU, and I was so pumped. And I remember, being asked, well, what else do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. I want this. I want this thing. Just let me do this, and I'll do whatever else. I wish I had been more thoughtful about that at the time. I wish I had said, geez, do you have any time in the outpatient transplant clinic? Or do you guys have anything embedded in one of the other clinics where I could specialize? What I'll tell you is that while inpatient CL work from, you know, a department funding side doesn't always pay all that well because, you know, Medicare, Medicaid isn't fair. Outpatient CL does tend to pay, or outpatient specialty clinics do tend to pay pretty well. And I don't know any clinic that doesn't want more psychiatry access. And so I would kind of link the two. If there's something that you're quite interested in, be ready to pitch that as something you might want to go do. It doesn't take that much to actually be an expert in these areas because there aren't that many people who are necessarily pushing into that realm, and will only make you a better inpatient doctor because it will also help you build some of those outside relationships with people who will rotate into the hospital. And you can really make a name for yourself that way. And then to hiring directors, I think somebody coming in saying, I would love to build this clinic, I have a real interest in this, is always very enticing. And so those are kind of my thoughts, trying to link the few together.
Yeah, and I guess as Dr. Rosen was speaking, I think one thing that came to mind is that, you know, when you're a PGY2 rotating through CL, I think you're typically most commonly exposed to inpatient, like the reactive CL model, maybe if you're in a hospital that has some proactive consultation, but it's usually like hospital-based psychiatry. So I think that often as a resident, you know, you see CL as hospital-based. And while that's a very common model, I think more broadly, CL is sort of the intersection of psychiatry and medicine, or psychiatry of the medically ill. And so there is a lot of outpatient work. In fact, I've always been struck by how many CL psychiatrists there are that spend vast amounts of their time doing outpatient work if they so desire, and if that's what they want. For instance, I think a lot of psycho-oncology is outpatient. Transplant psychiatry jobs often have an outpatient component, and I really appreciated what was shared about sort of considering also sort of not just the short-term interest, but also the long-term burnout in terms of acuity. I definitely think that, you know, I look forward to a lot of my outpatient days a little bit. The inpatient days are a little more chaotic and unpredictable. So, you know, I'll definitely say that. And you know, definitely as Dr. Fleisch said, I think that, you know, your priorities and different things that are important to you in life can also evolve over time. And so, for instance, it may so happen that at a certain time or phase in your life, you may want like 100% inpatient and you're very like excited about that. But then, you know, at another point in time, it may be, you know, due to whatever reason, personal, etc., you might want to, you know, work from home for like a certain number of days of the week, or do, you know, tele psychiatry from the outpatient in the outpatient setting, etc., or have some protective like admin time or scholarly time. So I think that that's an important thing to be aware of. And I guess the last thing I'll say is again along the lines of the compromise. I mean, you know, just sort of linking together what we were talking about before, I will say that, you know, for people who need visa sponsorship, I think it can often feel like, as it can be reality, there can be more constraints or more sort of compromises in terms of, like, in addition to everything that has already been talked about, there's also the fact that you need an employer that will sponsor a visa, you know, sometimes an employer who also in addition will sponsor a green card. So there's a lot of variables, but I will say, you know, hang in there, don't lose hope, don't be discouraged. I think your first job, you know, even in the best of circumstances, is very often not your last job, or at least even if it's at the same institution, the way your time is spent, etc., can change a lot. So I would say that, you know, even if you are in a job that's not completely like workflow wise aligned with what you want, you know, because of visa restrictions, etc., I would say still, you know, continue being connected with the CL folks at your institution, at the ACLP, all the SIGs, etc., because you really never know what opportunities open up when.
So, great point, Dr. Guthlick, because that actually brings me to the next question, which is just overall, like, what does the job market look like now for like academic CL positions? Maybe at your home institution or one nearby you. I'm not saying that there's open positions at UT Southwestern CL Psychiatry right now, but I'm not saying that there aren't. So kind of overall, what does the job market look right now for like academic CL for the whole panel?
What I would say is it's really good to email if you're not sure. academic CL is always going to have a bottleneck, but that doesn't mean that there aren't positions open necessarily. There's a couple things that are influencing right now. So is the institution you're interested in having some sort of freezes because of fun politics happening? Because I know that there are hiring freezes that are happening at Stanford, for example, but that still doesn't mean that there may or may not be some positions that can open up. The other question that comes up is, are you going to be able to fill some sort of niche that a program that you're applying to is lacking? So we just had someone at Stanford applying who's going to be joining the faculty who finished their fellowship at Mount Sinai and just cold messaged and was like, hey, I'm, wondering, I'm finishing fellowship. I am, specializing in reproductive psychiatry. I am wondering if you guys have any jobs. There was nothing specific that was on the website except for an integrated behavioral health opportunity, but she got an interview. There was a discussion of like, hey, how can we build this? Can we convince the department to do this since reproductive psychiatry isn't something that we have someone specialized in right now? And lo and behold, she's joining our faculty. So while there always is going to be a bottleneck and things might not be specifically listed, always email and be like, hey, just putting this out there, I'm really interested in doing this. Is there a role for me now or maybe in the future to do this type of position? I'm happy to, help think about filling other shoes as well in the meantime.
Yeah, I would second that. What the websites have is not necessarily what is actually available inherently. Also, if there's somewhere that you're thinking about, whether it's a specific program or a specific role, starting those conversations now can at least put you on the radar. So worst case scenario, if they don't have something open, but something opens in the future, now you're on their radar. This really applies to those of you who are listening in who are still in training. If you're thinking you might want to stick around your home institution or go back home or go to wherever you're looking at and be doing CL, you might say, hey, I'm a PGY2, I'm currently pursuing this, and I'm looking at becoming a CL psychiatrist in what, 3 years, 4 years? I can't do math today. Just, obviously you're not going to know now, but just putting myself on your radar to say that I'm really interested in coming to this institution because X, Y, and Z, I'm from here. I have these connections here. I really like how your CL department works, whatever. And then continuing to sort of keep those connections up over time. And if you're actually in practice right now, and you send out a cold email and they don't have anything open, the same thing can be true, where right now maybe they don't have something open, but you keep those connections open and then maybe in a year they do.
Yeah, I would say that CL is a small world and it's a tight-knit world. And any personal connections you can make, anybody you've worked with that has connections, it's very useful to go through those channels. I would say that a lot of times positions don't exist at the moment, but if the right candidate is coming, there might be ways to shift services around to bring new talent in, to bring excited people in. And it never hurts to reach out and start making the connections. Because as I said, it's a small world and it's a really tight-knit world. If you guys get the chance to go to ACLP, highly recommend it. Go meet people in person. Tell them you're excited about the area, ask great questions. You might see them again the following year or 5 years down the line, or at a webinar, in 2025, where I get to see somebody that I interviewed with a couple of years back, doing something different now. So like strongly recommend, make the connections. It's also a long game for all of this.
I couldn't agree with that more. Because I knew I wanted to be in Maryland, I made it a point to go and meet the folks from Maryland at ACLP when I was a fellow. And I think that level of engagement really highlights your interests. I would also say time of year matters because right now I think trainees are looking for jobs, but also maybe in another couple months, faculty may be looking to shift positions or to leave their current institution. So the institution might be in an in-between place. And at Maryland, we do rolling interviews and rolling job offers. So it's not like a one set time of year that people are interviewed or get job offers. And faculty do transition. Faculty retire, they announce they're leaving to move somewhere or do something else. And that's when the institution realizes they may have an opening. So I would say, to highlight what everybody else has said, just reach out, let people know you're interested, and then they'll keep you in mind if and when something comes up.
All great points. So moving on to the next question that's come in. So this is more for like, now once you're in the field, like how do you continue like sub-specializing in something after fellowship? Like cardiology, women's mental health, geriatrics, neuropsych, like especially if it's not something that you specifically trained in, like during residency or fellowship. Any hot tips, team?
Don't be afraid of it. Go see those patients, set up a clinic, go make a liaison with that department, go talk to them, be willing to see the patients. That's really what it comes down to. There's all sorts of resources throughout ACLP with SIGs, with groups, et cetera, that you can jump onto, do research with, but nothing is going to replace being willing to see the population. So many of these patients don't have specialists who want to see them. And there's almost always an opportunity unless you're trying to do cardiology at MGH or something like that, where it's already saturated. Most places aren't even close to saturated.
And
I
you're
couldn't agree. You go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Dr. Rosen, you're absolutely right that the SIGs at ACLP are a great opportunity because there's SIGs for many of these, not every single subspecialty, but there's a lot. And there's people who are very thrilled to share their expertise in, setting up a transplant clinic or psycho-onc or neuropsych or any of those things. I'll also put out a plug, a shameless plug for our own SIG, the Early Career Psychiatrist SIG, for those of you who are 5 or less years out from residency and fellowship. We have a WhatsApp board and a listserv where people send out, hey, I'm trying to start up this kind of clinic or this subspecialty. Does anyone have experience? And we've connected a couple people that way. So that's another worthwhile way to get to know people who are already doing this. But yes, you have to be willing to jump in and actually see these patients. Just keep in mind that if you've done CL training, certainly you already have some experience working with patients with a variety of different medical illnesses, and you can adapt and you can continue to learn and grow your knowledge base on the fly. Even if you're just coming in with psychiatry experience, but you're willing to sit down, be there for these patients and learn about these illnesses, that makes you a resource who's going to get better at this as you go.
I would just add as well, I agree with what everybody has said so far. You have to have a tremendous amount of grit, I think, in these scenarios, especially in a setting where perhaps the subspecialty is not as well known, like Dr. Rosen said. Like I had mentioned before, I developed a subspecialty for like 20% of time working with patients experiencing homelessness. And I developed that interest during residency, but you can also develop that interest during your fellowship. And so during my fellowship, you get a half day of academic time, you have to. So I actually use that half day of academic time to develop a subspecialty clinic for people experiencing homelessness. I did consultations for that population. And even though my fellowship director had like no idea what I was doing, basically, he was really supportive and was like, sure, go ahead. But a lot of that was because I sort of pushed that. And then when I became an attending, I pushed that once again for that 20% time. And then when we were talking about how you manage your time, I had 80-20, but then gradually it became like 70-30, 60-40, 50-50 as the clinic began to grow. And I think, but a lot of that takes effort to show that you can build it, or you can get a grant, or you can do different things, because you sort of have to talk your system into understanding the value of whatever you're interested in. And I think Mira mentioned this, that they were able to hire somebody who had interest in reproductive psychiatry. She probably talked them into understanding what they were missing out on. Same thing, like I tried to talk Vanderbilt into why they absolutely needed to have a program on people who are underserved and how much money we could save the hospital system. You have to have a pitch, and you have to be able to do it in a way that other people can listen to that pitch and understand it. So if I told Dr. Forrester, who's the fellowship director that this is what I wanted to do. I needed to do this for a half day of fellowship time. And she was like, but if you do it in a way that she understands, she would probably be willing to give me my half day of fellowship time to utilize that for my academic project. Am I right, Dr. Forrester?
Sorry, trying to unmute. Yes. And one of the things we do that we pride ourselves on is giving fellows the opportunity to create liaison experiences, because we know how valuable that is in the career world. I'll also say that if you're interested in another subspecialty area and maybe you didn't see a lot of it, if you're looking at an institution and they already have that relationship established, that's one way to kind of learn more about the patient population and learn from people who have done it before and really walk in with at least a foundation that's already been set up. That was my experience. So I didn't have to create the thing, but I did walk into a structure that was already set up so that I could learn from it and then adapt it once I got more comfortable with the patient population. So I think another plug for fellowship, because you do get to kind of figure out how to sell your wares a little bit, and really in the liaison conversations and in the research side, figuring out how to add value to an institution is something that you should be learning about in fellowship.
Yeah, I think a lot of wonderful, tips and have been shared. I think the only thing I'll add, kind of based on my personal experience, is that I feel like you learn a lot in training, of course, and there's, great, tremendous growth curve, learning curve. But I also think that people don't often talk about how, as a new attending, there's such a huge growth curve and learning curve as well. So I feel like you're exposed to so many things and I think that, for instance, in my first job, it was a CL job, but at the same time, they needed coverage for ECT. And so the person who was doing ECT actually took me under his wing and, was very kind. And I basically started doing ECT there. And this was not something I'd imagined doing or trained for during residency or fellowship, but it was something that I was open to learn and I was open to sort of acquiring that skill. And there was, somebody graciously willing to teach. So there's that, but there's also the fact that, for instance, transplant. So now, I'm sort of, transplant psychiatry is a big part of what I do. And I love working with living donors. But during my fellowship, I mean, yes, I did get exposed to some transplant recipients, but not to any donors. That was just sort of like an interest that came out of reading about it and like a fascination with the psychology of altruism and all that. But I think that it was something that I pursued. So whether it was at my first job or when I was, looking for my next job, I knew that I wanted to work with living donors. And so I think that as an attending, that is sort of an experience that I've acquired through working and reading and sort of being part of the, living donor special interest group or work committee at the ACLP, Transplant SIG, etc. So yeah, I definitely think that there's, if you are, as Dr. Rosen said, you're, willing to see the patients and you're interested and curious. And I think there are lots of resources that you can help to you can educate yourself with, and lots of people and mentors you can sort of find. But yeah, I do think that you can certainly acquire a lot of new skills, and also medicine evolves, right? So for instance, like during the pandemic, nobody was an expert and everybody was sort of getting expertise on the go. So there were people who, started like a long COVID clinic, for instance. So yeah, absolutely, these things happen.
Mira,
I'm sorry, if I could add to that too before we switch questions.
please.
Yeah, so there's just a couple other things. One, this is definitely not a popular route to go, but I know many people who have done it, and that's if you're really passionate about geriatric psychiatry or interventional psychiatry, but you also really want CL. I know people who have done another fellowship, and that's right. This is also a way the pros versus cons of like, can I go yet another year without that? But I actually just interviewed an amazing gentleman who had done public psychiatry fellowship and then forensic psychiatry fellowship and was doing CL psychiatry, and he was able to very clearly articulate his reasoning. And so thinking about, if you already know kind of the trajectory of where you want to go and additional fellowship years are going to help you with that, absolutely, like go ahead, and those different fellowships will also have different ways of teaching. Similar to that, and it ties into the question about continuing to obtain supervision. Yes, absolutely. And this can help with that goal, as people have been describing. So the example of cardiac. So I wanted to get more cardiac knowledge. I actually reached out to Christopher Solano at Columbia because he had done a lot of research around cardiac psychiatry and was like, hey, I would love some information as I'm seeing cases. What do you recommend in terms of readings? What are your thoughts about this type of case? And I got supervision from him on cases. Or we had a person who was really, really interested in interventional psychiatry while they were doing fellowship. He actually has now opened up a TMS clinic as part of his practice in New York. He went to the interventional psychiatry folks at Stanford and was like, hey, I'm a fellow. I want to learn more about interventional stuff. Can we integrate this somehow? So it doesn't have to be part of CL to even get supervision. If there are places that are adjacent that you can reach out to get information, then do that and ask for supervision, ask for that, for people to be mentors and help you in achieving your goal.
All right. No, thank you so much, Mary, for adding that. A question actually just came in chat, and great question. I wish somebody told me the answer to this when I was going for it. But any tips on handling rolling deadlines? Wanting to not let a good opportunity slip, but also interested in seeing what is out there. This process, oddly enough, made me grateful for uniformity organization of med school residency application cycle. So first off, if you're considering UT Southwestern, please choose us. Just whoever you are, wherever you are. But panel, how do y'all do this? Because there's no guidelines on this. It's so awkward. But what? What do y'all think?
I'll hop on this one. This is hard. I would say just be an honest player. Institutions are not going to be upset if you are looking at other places. In fact, if they were upset that you're trying to find a good job, I wonder how good of an employer they're actually going to be to you in the bigger picture. I just think being honest and saying, hey, I am looking at this. Can I have a little bit more time here to make a decision, etc. I think we should all strive to treat each other as well as we can as physicians and try to look out for each other. And we should give each other some grace on this, including the people who might be hiring you. Just be honest with people and let them know. That would be my best piece of advice. I would never be terribly hurt if somebody said, hey, I am looking at this other job. If I really want them, I'm going to think, let me make them an offer that I think other people can't beat. And if somebody else can, I want them to have that job that would be better for them in that condition.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I also want to emphasize, right, that if there's a good opportunity and you really like that opportunity, then it's okay to take it. You're not married to it, right? It's okay to take it and do it and learn from it and then keep your eye out. And if you find something that's a better fit down the line, then applying to that and see if that works. But I would say, especially coming out of fellowship, it can be really hard to be doing the shopping depending on how busy your fellowship is and weighing programs and going back and forth. And so sometimes, you just want to say, I'm just choosing this opportunity because it's the best fit for me right now. And then once I'm in a more stable place, I can figure it out. It all depends on what is going on in your life and what works the best for you.
I would also just add, just having some thought about looking widely as is comfortable for you, depending on sort of your geography needs and some of the other things that have already been mentioned about the type of job that you want to have. But I think have a realistic sense, I want to look at X number of places or X number of opportunities before I decide. Be honest and upfront that you are looking. I think most institutions understand that you are looking at different places. And then you can say, I need X more time. So I think one of the things that I see people doing is kind of ping-ponging their way through interviews rather than sort of being a little bit more intentional about where they want to work, the places they are interested in, and following up those conversations versus sort of feeling like I'll just wait, I'll just kind of see. I think if this is your first job or you're early in career, it's really important to start thinking a little bit more proactively about what it is that you want so that when you have multiple folks that are interested in you, you're able to at least be realistic. Here's what I'm looking for. here's some of the other things that I'm doing. I'm in the process, and then you can talk about like deadlines for when people want answers and different things like that. But I think there's some intentionality that's required. If you ping pong through, there's a lot of sort of hazard in that.
Also, I guess I would say that, well, first off, we're talking about looking for a job, not looking for a fellowship position. During all of this, at the beginning, I thought we were talking about looking for a fellowship position. So I just wanted to clarify to everybody. But when you are actually doing your interview, that would be the time to tell them everything that Anik said. So don't wait until it's too late, because then it can get awkward for you. So I think I definitely did that during some, and now when I interview, I make sure to say, this is kind of my deadlines. This is what I'm looking for in a position. So be very clear about what you're looking for in a position, but also say, I won't be able to make my decision until the end of January. If that person then says to you, you have 14 days to make your decision, they're kind of being a little bit difficult, and you can then send them an email and say to them, as we discussed, and you don't have to really be passive aggressive about it, but it's more like, as we discussed, I won't be able to make my decision until January. You don't have to say a lot of stuff like, because my father is doing this. You just have to say, as we discussed, I won't be able to make my decision until the end of January. Or you could just say, if the end of January is within another 14 days, you can actually say, may I have a 14-day extension? And most of the time, the programs will provide you with another extension. The last thing I would say is that depending on how many places you're applying to, strategically for you, you can actually position yourself that you try to schedule your interviews in advance as closely as possible, just so that it is less stressful for you. Because if you schedule your interviews very far apart, then oftentimes they will actually say to you, you need to respond to me within 14 days. And then you've interviewed once in like October, and then you're interviewing in January. And to be honest, that would be really stressful, because then you really do need to tell the October person if you're going to accept the position by January, because then that's a little bit too late. I hope that made sense.
Do you mind if I chime back in on this? Because you guys said some things that reminded me of some really great advice I got. The two pieces that like really echo in my head are, one, your first job is not your career. Your first job should be looked at as something that can help you attain 2 to 5 year goals. If it turns out that you love that institution and it grows into your career, that's fantastic. But I would not look at your first job as this is necessarily my forever place. More, does it allow me to achieve goals that are meaningful to me in those 2 to 5 years that you're going to be there? And then the second thing, and this is playing off what Dr. Fleisch was saying, I remember somebody telling me, when you're actually applying for these jobs, the institution is no longer the commodity, you're the commodity. You're the fully trained doctor. And it's easy for us in medicine who have jumped through hoop after hoop after hoop to be so accustomed to, oh, but I have to show them how well I can jump through hoops. But in truth, fully trained psychiatrists, especially fully trained C-L psychiatrists, are not super common. There is a shortage. And don't forget that. I know in the earlier part of this, we were talking about, well, how do you make yourself a little bit more competitive, et cetera? But there are jobs out there. And don't forget that at this point, the hospital needs you. The patients need you. And, realize that you do have some ability to say, yeah, I'm not making this decision for a month. Dr. Fleisch, I loved your comment, though, about say it in the interview so that it doesn't have to be passive aggressive on the other side. I wish I had heard that prior to my own interviewing. So thank you for that.
Great tips all. Actually, now that we're talking about like the accepting position stuff, kind of taking a step back from that. Let's say you get an offer from a place that you're interviewing at, and you're trying to be like, hey, is this a good offer or not? Like, how do you even, like figure out if it's a good offer, like in terms of compensation, job composition, academic time and stuff like that? Are there like standards we should meet? Like, who do you even ask for advice on if this is a good job offer or not?
I found it really helpful to have mentors at various institutions, because then you can have honest conversations, not just, for instance, if you're trying to stick around, where you did your training, you can have honest conversations with other people. I've been lucky enough to have CL mentors, both from residency and from fellowship, and from colleagues of people I knew from fellowship at different places. As people have mentioned, for better and for worse, CL psychiatry is a pretty small field, and so people know each other. And the downside of this is that, it's a small world. I wouldn't advise, again, doing something passive aggressive and creating a bad reputation. But the other side of this is that your mentor probably knows somebody else who's a good mentor and can connect you. And so that way you can get advice from multiple people, particularly people who are not at wherever you are looking for the job, to say, can you give me a reality check? Is this something that's reasonable or not? Because not one person's going to have the right answer. But if you sort of crowdsource it from a bunch of people who've done this, who don't really have any skin in the game, you'll have a better idea of how positive a offer is and whether it's a good idea or not.
If you
Agreed.
do go to fellowship, I would say that if you have a good fellowship director, to be very honest, they will probably help you and they would give you advice. One thing that's really important is that a good mentor at your same institution should be rooting for you. And they will want you to probably stay at their own institution, but they actually want you to do well. And so when I was fellowship director, I was more than happy to look at the CVs of our fellows or residents, or look at, their offers, and say to them, like, oh my gosh, you should totally negotiate this, but like this part is really good. Oh my gosh, this is like the highest, you are going to make more than me. And like, this is a great offer, but having to go through that, even though maybe I really wanted them to stay at the time when I was at Vanderbilt, I would prefer for them to stay at Vanderbilt, but what I really wanted is I wanted them to succeed. And so I don't know what Dr. Forrester has to say about that, but I'm pretty certain she's going to say the same thing.
So Mira, we'll have you go, and Veronique.
Actually, I think it's like a more smooth transition, Dr. Forrest.
Okay, fine, sorry, Dr. Forrester,
Fine.
please go, Mira.
Okay, everybody's so formal with me. So I will say this. I think my answer was gonna be, I think first, if you're in fellowship, your program director should be the main person or one of the main people that you go to. I do agree with having lots of other mentors who could give you different advice, but one of the big things I try to do is standardize the process. Let's go through your CV. I look at offer letters every year of my fellows, so I'm quite familiar with what the current job market looks like, both in academic CL and outside, because my fellows are going to lots of different places. So I'm very familiar, and I'm up to date. So if you're gonna look at mentors, look at people who are up to date. So like if they're not looking at offer letters routinely, their advice could be much more around like job satisfaction, maybe some negotiation tips. Our fellows do negotiation exercises to kind of really understand what that looks like and how to show up when you need to negotiate. And then the other thing is everything is not the same. So academic negotiation versus community or non-academic CL negotiation is very different. The things you can negotiate are different. And the academic negotiation really depends a lot on the institution. So you really have to be educated about what things are negotiable in an academic setting versus a community or non-academic setting.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that, right, by asking your mentors who are up to date about how to negotiate those things, oftentimes you'll find for academics, right, that the salaries might be a lot lower, and they might have, right, different, like more benefits in terms of housing support that is like not linked to like crazy golden chain loans, or maybe depending on the institution, right, healthcare, vacation. So you also have to think about what is important for you when you are having the discussion, if you are more flexible in one versus the other. The other thing I would say is that I'm all for transparency in these conversations. I find it a lot of places, especially places that there is more like constraining hierarchies in the institutions, that people are worried about having conversations of how much do you make, how much do you make? And that can be something that you can, when you are applying somewhere, can get a sense of when you are interviewing with different people. What I would say is that it is reasonable to ask, as a follow-up, for people that you're interviewing with. I'm just curious, like, what was your starting salary range when you applied to this position, to get a sense from them? And if they are willing to talk about it, it also gives you a sense of, are there differences as what being offered to you versus what that person is making, for example.
No, thank you so much, team, for answering that question. So I guess that brings me, as we enter like the last 13, 15 minutes of the talk, like one of the spiciest questions we've gotten in years past, which is, what is a good like starting salary for a CL doc? Like everyone's like, oh yeah, just ask around. And then you ask around and it's like, I don't know. I suddenly become very, like mum on the topic. So, but in years past, we've had like very honest conversations. So like, how do you begin to find out like what is like a reasonable amount to make? Because it seems like so much more money than like being a fellow or resident, but also like, could it be more? Like, am I leaving money on the table?
Um, that's a hard question, especially because you have to think about region, of the country. Um, does the hospital think its prestige means it can pay you less? How badly do you want the prestige nonetheless in that case, et cetera? I think a really nice starting point is to take a look at the AAMC data for, whatever sort of institution you're looking at and see what the percentiles are. To my knowledge, and somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, there isn't a CL specific one, but I tend to think of general psych, maybe a little bit higher for CL because I think most people with a fellowship in at least a lot of public institutions do get a little bit more for that. It is a nice way to think about it. I would highly recommend putting in salaries into cost of living calculators and see how far is that money going to go in that area as well. It's something that I didn't really think about a ton at first, but it is a useful thing to think of. And then I would also think about how much is the total comp your base plus bonus, like total comp being base plus bonus, how much are they splitting that? Are we talking about a very consistent and reasonable base salary and then a very variable bonus? It's hard to, you have to factor a lot of these things in to think. I would be very cautious around jobs that have a big RVU production in CL because the reality is we can't really control how many RVUs we have to some extent. I mean, they're not our patients, inpatient. And so I would think about those factors, but to come back to something that was most useful, AAMC data is very useful and it gives you at least a ballpark.
I would just say it's called the AAMC Faculty Salary Report, and most institutions are going to be looking at the 50th percentile. So it's broken down into your rank, and your degree and the region where the school or the institution is located. So this salary report is paid though, so most people have to pay to access it. There are lots of online forums that you can inquire if people have the data for a particular area in the country, in or a particular institution or a geographic area if that's what you're interested in. And then I would say benefits matter. At Maryland, we have access to a pension. Pensions are really not something that many physicians have access to. And so, like, that weighed a lot for me in my decision more than the salary itself at the time that I started. And all the other benefits that come with being a state employee, which is very unique in Maryland. So it just really depends on what you want, what the benefits look like, how much the salary, the number itself matters to you versus everything else, the cost of living, do you have moonlighting opportunities? Are there additional ways to make income so that you're not just relying on like an RVU system, which, as was already mentioned by Dr. Rosen, is really, really difficult to adhere to for inpatient CL?
The starting salary for inpatient CL at the University of Florida in Gainesville is between 230,000 and 245,000. It's not, I'm not saying that range because certain people get higher or lower. It's because I don't actually know exactly what it is at the moment, but it's somewhere between that number. And at Vanderbilt in Nashville, Tennessee, it's somewhere between 200 and 215. It is significantly lower. And Nashville is significantly higher cost of living than Gainesville, Florida, which has a very low cost of living. So the money goes much farther and you make more money there. Also, you make more money at University of Florida if you have a title. I know we're talking about early career, but like when I was there, I was the chief of psychiatry. And so that came with like a $30,000 bonus. Well, I'm just going to keep that to myself, what I was about to say. But you do get a bonus if you like have a title associated with things. Or like assistant, associate, full professor comes with different salaries as well. I also agree with the benefits. So like a private institution, so Vanderbilt versus University of Florida, private institution, I had to pay into my insurance. Public institution, my insurance was totally free, which was weird. And then also like all my CMEs are paid for, like all of my licensure was paid for at both institutions. And then both institutions, I got an office to myself, which doesn't always happen at places. And then I was able to go to all the conferences I needed to at both institutions. And those are things to make sure that you ask for because they cost a lot of money, all of those things. I'm trying to think if there are others. I'll add it in if I can think of others.
So we'll probably have time for one last question. And again, like attendees, great questions so far. Like these are the things I wish people have been asking all these years. But last question for the panel before we start wrapping up. For those of you who did not start out at your dream job, how did you work through it and what helped with burnout?
So this is not exactly an answer to the question, but it's close. So I'm still at my first job. I'm an early career psychiatrist. My job is pretty close to what I was hoping to get, but I would say that no job is perfect, right? Every job has things that are really good and every job has days that are really hard. I think back to when I was in MS3 and getting ready to pick a specialty, and one of the pieces of advice I got was pick the field that the best the best thing gets you excited and gets you geeking out. The average day, bread and butter, is something that you still think is cool, and the worst day is something that doesn't make you want to go home and cry. And I think that that's not a terrible way to think about this, that, you know, there's gonna be things about every job that you like more than other things. And I think it's been helpful for me to think about the balance of, on one hand, when there are things that are hard, are they things that are still not so bad that I feel like it makes me not want to do it, and it is outweighed by the things I really latch onto. For me, medical education is a huge thing that I love, and so I roll myself into that. I love every moment I get to spend teaching medical students and, you know, reading personal statements and advising people who are applying to psychiatry. Maybe that's not all of you, but there should be something in your job, even if it's not your dream job, that makes you still geek out and get excited. There should still be things, even if it's not your dream job on a daily basis, that are still something that makes you happy. And that those really bad days, because there will be really bad days, are not so bad they make you want to go home and cry. For me, that's kind of what it's been.
Yeah, going off of that, I'll say, certainly I don't think I can directly or, literally answer that question, because I do feel like I loved my first job as I love my current job. I will say that again, being on a visa status, I was a little constrained. And then, I had this opportunity to actually be a military psychiatrist, or to join the army as an army psychiatrist, which was a pathway to citizenship. And I did know going in that, I don't know where I'll be sent, where I'll be stationed. And I think I knew that I love education. I love sort of interacting with and teaching and educating like multiple levels of learners. And I wanted to do CL. So I think the stars did align, and I was fortunate enough that I was able to do that during the first job. But yes, there were, some challenges like deployment or being sent to another state kind of unexpectedly to cover down an inpatient unit. But I do think that, as Jeremy was saying, I feel like I enjoy interacting with patients. I love psychiatry in any form. So I feel like I was able to sort of enjoy that part of it. I think that I was able to sort of, maybe my defenses or whatever, but I do have a sense of adventure, but I was also able to see it as, okay, yeah, one day, I'll look back on this and like write about it or talk about it, or, there'll be a story to share kind of thing. So I feel like that also stood me in good stead. And I will say, in terms of wellness and burnout, I think, having things you enjoy doing, and being able to make the time for them, whether that's, going to the gym or, I feel like I always stayed in touch with singing, which has been a great creative outlet for me. So I would not underestimate that, if you are in a job that's not optimal, etc. But of course, if you're in sort of a toxic situation, etc., then I think it's really important to sort of be aware of that and, set boundaries and limits as best you can.
Yeah, from my perspective, one thing that I try to tell my trainees is that the cost of hiring an attending physician ultimately is 3 years worth of their salary. And an institution's not really breaking even on somebody for that period of time, given all the training, onboarding, time that they're not there, et cetera. And so what I would say is most jobs are not ideal. Have your goal, have your 2 to 5 year goal for what a job's going to get you. If there's a component of your job that you're really not liking, be honest with your leaders about it. It will be cheaper for them to, help you move into something else that you might like in the institution than to have you leave. Not every leader sees it that way, but that's what business schools will tell people. And I think it's worth noting that, again, you're the commodity here. You are bringing something to the table. If you really don't like something, work your way out of it. It can happen. One of my best friends was doing some version of an urgent care clinic, and that was the one part of her job that she did not enjoy. And it took her a couple years, but she got out of it, and now she's much happier with her job. Otherwise, she liked it.
I'll just add really quickly that I've been in the same institution for my whole career. But my job has changed many times. And I think it's about your intention, it's about your flexibility, your willingness to do things for a period of time, to try it out, to see how it is, but then really being proactive if you're giving it a good try and it's really not working out. And I think ultimately leadership will see the value in what it is that you do and invest in you. If they don't, then you can make some different decisions. But I do think it's not about this instant like gratification and change. If you don't like something one day, like really sticking with something could really pay off long term.
All right. Well, we are fast reaching the end of our time together. So just wanted to first give special thanks to our sponsors, the APA Council on C-L Psychiatry, the ACLP DEIA Subcommittee, the ACLP Business Psychiatry Subcommittee, the ECP SIG, Aaron Smith from APA staff, who is helping run this whole thing and keep it afloat, partner management of ACLP, and our amazing panel, y'all. Thanks everyone for joining. You can see here a picture of my 2-year-old son on the other end, who you may have heard in the background screaming. He is having his favorite snack, a donut. He's part of why I do what I do. And so remember, we're doing all this, for the right reasons, to make the world, including for our families, a better place. So thanks everyone for joining. If you have a specific question you want to ask it anonymously to the panel, feel free to email me directly at chandlan.kandai@gmail.com. I am not in a hiring position, so who am I going to tell? And I can forward it on anonymously to the panel and get back to y'all. But otherwise, again, everyone, thank you so much. Thank you so much, panel, for taking your time to give us these great thoughts and your wisdom. Have a good day, all.
Thank you all.
Thank you all so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Alright.
everybody.
Thank you. Aaron, let's start recording.